Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests, a warm welcome to you all. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. Just to let you know, there is a recording going on. It's not faced to the public, but it's just here for posterity. So just so that you're aware. Before we begin, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the Bunurong people of the Kulin Nation, the traditional custodians of the land and waters now known as the City of Greater Dandenong. I pay my respects to their elders past and present and acknowledge their enduring connection to this land, its climate, culture, country and waterways, elements that remain integral to the shared identity of our community. My name is Griselle Walmegia and I'm deeply honoured to be your Master of Ceremonies today. It's a privilege to stand before you, not only because of this important occasion, but because I've had the opportunity to be part of a remarkable journey with so many trailblazing individuals who have shaped this project. To start, I'd like to offer some background of the Spirit of Enterprise project, the historical marker trail and map, and how I became involved in what has now become such a significant part of our local history. In 2009, when this project first came to me, I was serving as the council officer responsible for public art in Greater Dandenong. What began nearly 15 years ago as an idea for a public art sculpture in Springvale gradually evolved into something much larger, a rich, multifaceted project that honours the spirit of enterprise shown by the community in welcoming and supporting over 30,000 migrants and refugees who pass through the Enterprise Migrant Hostel. I remember the first time I met with Merle about this idea. I was asked to discuss a public art sculpture to commemorate the hostel to be in the heart of Springvale. Merle's reputation had already preceded her, so I'll admit I was a bit nervous, but also secretly excited at the opportunity to work with her. She shared the following a highly successful exhibition at the Immigration Museum. The community had expressed a strong desire for a large sculpture in Springvale, perhaps one depicting people with suitcases, symbolising the journey of those who'd passed through the hostel. I remember with a touch of bureaucratic curiosity asking Mel, "So who exactly wanted this sculpture?" I did at Margaret Thatcher at that time, and I must have sounded a bit forward, even insolent, but Mel was very patient with me. And though she didn't provide a direct answer right away, she did quite knowingly recruit me into the journey of figuring out what the community actually wanted. That conversation marked the beginning of my involvement in what would become a long and rewarding adventure, one that culminates today with the official launch of the historical marker trail map. The Spirit of Enterprise project has since garnered recognition as a project of national significance. It has attracted significant attention from various government agencies and influential individuals like the late Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser, Joan Kirner, Simon Crean, and many others, reflecting its broad impact beyond our local community. The historical markers and map are the product of a collective effort, a true labour of love for all involved. The installation of 6 interpretive signs across key locations in Springvale is the result of countless hours of planning, collaboration and reflection. These markers trace the migration journey, celebrating the vital touch points that shape the settlement process for so many. The trail map offers a self-guided tour through Springvale's multicultural heritage, allowing visitors to explore the migration history that has shaped the area. The markers are not just monuments, they are a tribute to the resilience of migrants, and the community's spirit of collaboration in building a vibrant multicultural identity. The trail map is one of the lasting legacies of the Spirit of Enterprise project, representing an ongoing conversation about migration, community building, and the role locals have played in shaping both their area's identity and their own. It's a legacy that celebrates connection, resilience, and shared stories, bringing people together to recognise how far we've come and where we're headed as a community. I'd now like to invite Jan Tresize, OAM, and Heather Duggan, Greater Dandenong Living Treasure, to share more insights with you.
Do you want to go first? No. Hi everyone, it's lovely to be here and it's really quite exciting. I can feel Merle sitting on my shoulder saying, well done guys. This has been an amazing project involving so many people and every layer of government. It all began a couple of days before Christmas in 2007. In the bustle leading up to Christmas, Merle rang me to say she'd seen an application for funding to mount an exhibition at the Immigration Museum. She'd been keen for some time to tell the story of the Enterprise Hostel and the influence it had had on the development of the city of Springvale and the way the people of Springvale responded when those coming from the hostel settled in the community. She said she'd put together an application but needed names for a small supporting committee. We probably won't get the funding, she said, and in any case, it won't be a lot of work. Famous last words, haha. I didn't think much more about it with the Christmas rush, and then in January she rang me and said, we got the funding. So began this amazing project, a wonderful tribute to Merle's determination. We're going to talk for a while, don't worry about clapping.
I also received those calls from Merle, and the Enterprise group began. At our first meeting, we decided that this project would be community-led. And so began our search for all the people who had lived and worked at the hostel. And we have a good range here today. One was there in its very first year. The data has become extensive on our database. People from the local area, from other parts of Australia, and some overseas. At each stage of the project, the Enterprise community asked for more. We thought along the way that this would be it, but we were told loud and clear that really we should consider this or consider that. And there's no more challenge for Merle than somebody to say that. Some were held. We decided that if we really were to find out what the community wanted, other than a list of things, and how they should be prioritised by the community, then we needed to have consultation. So we advertised for consultants who worked in the community area, and we were very fortunate that we were introduced to Finn and Jim. They ran 8 sessions. Some of you, many of you, would have been involved in those sessions. The great thing was that we had permission from Lexington Gardens, the site of the Enterprise Hostel, to hold those sessions. Some was held during the day and some were held in the evening. And it was the recommendations that came out of these consultations that guided the project and assured that it was community driven.
When the exhibition was launched at the Immigration Museum, many people reunited with old friends and the days they spent together in the hostel. There were 4 key speakers, all former residents who, as a collective, officially launched the exhibition. Geraldina was one of those speakers. Thank you, Geraldina.
Thank you, Griselle, for your introduction. Like some of you here this afternoon, I lived at the hostel Enterprise. So this event and launch is very meaningful and emotive for me. Most likely for you too, in different ways. I think we were touched by this project in many ways. Thank you for coming today and sharing this experience with us. I knew of Mel, but I have never met her personally. In the 90s, at a conference that we were both there, attending in the city, she was promoting, of course, the project, the Spirit of Enterprise project. I approached her and I said to her, Mel, I haven't met you, but I know of your work in Springvale. I live in Springvale, and there's a lot of news about what you're doing. And I'm starting to say that I admire her and her work. Admire her work. And she stopped me, and she said, she started to ask me questions. She did it because she didn't like accolades very much. So she stopped me there, and she started to tell me the story. And she said, okay, so you live in the hostel Enterprise, you are involved. What are your details? As everyone said already, the Spirit of Enterprise project started small, but continued to grow with all the challenge a true community development project brings up. Numerous conversations with the community, inclusion, advocacy to government bodies, all type of government bodies, numerous reports, grants, submissions, interviews, booklets, and of course the exhibition at the museum, Immigration Museum. And here we are today in this final chapter of the project, launching this trail of important sites in Springvale, highlighting organizations that contributed to the settlement of new arrivals to live first in the hostel, at the hostel Enterprise, and then settling in surrounding areas. These sites were essential in providing the support and foundation for new arrivals like myself to familiarize with the new environment, local community, and new country. I remember walking these sites in the late 70s, looking for information, connections, housing and housing goods. The library had already opened, and actually later on, the library started to bring books in different languages. That was such a gift for us. When we were in trouble or we needed help, we used to tell everybody, or each other, go to 5 Osborne. They can help you over there. You know why? Because it was difficult for us to pronounce a Springvale Community Aid Advice Bureau. So we all just go to 5 Osborne. Another important site was the school. And although the Ethnic Teachers Aid program was first set up by the Springvale Primary School, other schools followed because there was such a big influx of children coming. They didn't have the language, so the schools were very, very important. And I know, as years later, I was employed as the Spanish-speaking Ethnic Teachers Aid for nearly 8 years at St. Joseph Primary School. There was also a Vietnamese speaker. Actually, my predecessor is here too. She was also the Spanish-speaking teacher's aide later on at St. Joseph. I need to speak about the Springvale Neighborhood House. It was built in 1983 as a community project of the Bureau, creating a meeting space for small community groups and providing additional support and advice. The house is still there, it's still working very strongly, perhaps different type of groups, but still a place for the community. As you can see, the foundations were strongly laid by these visionaries that plan, push on, and advocate for these services and support to the area. This group of women working and living in the area care enough and understood the issues of new arrivals and had a vision, and relentlessly, tireless and joyfully carry out this amazing project. Their main objective was to acknowledge the strong presence and contribution of new arrivals, migrants in the area. 50 years later, I think that objective is still very relevant. Mel once said, strong communities just don't happen. So this group made it happen. Mel and Eric, Jan, Heather, Betty and Joyce, thank you.
So endearing. Thank you, Geraldina. I'd like to introduce Lisette Beerley, who will speak from her memories and through the eyes of a child's experience. Thank you, Lisette.
Welcome everyone, and thank you for making the time to celebrate this special launch of the Spirit of the Enterprise Trial with all of us together. As you have heard, a lot of work has gone through this project for many years. Thank you to the City of Greater Dandenong and for the organisers for making this possible. A special mention to Meryl Mitchell, who was the founder of this project, and here we are. Additionally, thank you for giving me the opportunity to participate as a guest speaker at this very special event. My name is Lisette Beerley, and I'm also known as Lisette Salada. I am here to tell you all a bit about my experience as a child. At some of these 8 sites, if not all. The first marker, the Enterprise Migrant Hostel, the tribute garden. A rose garden like no other. Fill many with hope to find a better and brighter future for themselves and their families. In this new country, they hope to call home. For me, as a child aged 12, the hostel was a safe place where I could make new friends from different parts of the world. Regardless of the language barrier, we tried to communicate. I was equipped with very little English. Our family arrived from El Salvador and settled at the Enterprise in January 1998. My parents, Wilfredo Celada, Anna, also known as Conchi, brothers Cesar, who was aged 9, Carlos was 3, my grandmother Amelia, Dad's mum, and his brother Walter, who was only 17. The Enterprise provided safe spaces for all of us. The children, we had basketball and tennis courts, playgrounds, and an entertainment centre where they made movies available every Wednesday evening. They were all in English, of course. From my recollection, there was a huge dining room, but it did not serve any traditional Salvadorian dishes. But we definitely learned to eat Western-style food. The second site, the Advice Bureau, from my childhood memories, I remember Mel Mitchell being an icon at this site, making sure refugees were aware that they could get legal aid and being supported there if they needed help. Also, I recalled Dad taking me when I was a young adult to get trained for tax returns so that I could help refugees to help with their tax returns. Site 3, the Springvale Neighbourhood House, a very special place to me, and it continues to be part of my life. In the early 90s, this house provided a space for the Salvadorian community. Children learned and stayed connected with El Salvadorian culture. And this was done through dance classes, which took place every Saturday afternoon. I was a student. Wilfredo Salado, my father, was one of the founders of the Maya Dance Group. This group continues to be an active group after 30 years. And the Springvale Neighborhood House continues to be the home. The aim of this group is to provide learning for new children whose parents may be of Salvadoran background. The beauty of it is that we have children who don't have a connection with El Salvador, but they want to learn about the culture, and we provide that opportunity. This group performs at multiple festivals around Melbourne. I am now the director, choreographer, and teacher, and have been for over 20 years. My daughters, Aaliyah and Sophia, are dancers at the Maya Dance Group and School of Dance, and I'm very happy that they enjoy that. My father has supported the Springvale Neighborhood House for over 30 years by providing his professional skills and expertise. He acted on various roles in the committee as a chairperson, vice chairperson, treasurer, and many other roles that I might not know. Site 4, the Springvale Road Shops. They didn't look the way they look now. In the early 90s, it was our place to visit every Saturday to buy groceries. Back then, the shops used to close at 1 p.m. From my recollection, and were shut on Sundays. Site 5, Springvale Primary School. Many children who lived at the Enterprise attended this school. My brother Cesar, the eldest of the boys, attended St. Joseph's Primary School. He did not receive any EAL classes at a language center. However, he managed to excel in the language and became the Spanish interpreter for the new arrivals. I recall this. Site 6, health services. My mother, Anna, made sure we attended our dental checkups there. I do recall those visits very vividly. Site 7, the social security. My grandmother, dad, and mom had to visit this site. I think once, possibly once a fortnight or monthly, to submit their forms and receive their family allowance. I do not think they used to enjoy this process, and they're all quick at acquiring further education and jobs. And Site 8, the Springvale Community Hub, and here we are today in this beautiful room, Mitchell Hall, and the rose that represents the Enterprise. To me, this place was the Springvale Library growing up, and it was a place I visited often to study and meet up with friends. We do not live in Springvale, but somehow Springvale continues to be a very special place for us. My eldest daughter currently studies at Calista College, and I meet her here once a week. I hope my stories have given you an understanding of how each site has played a very important role for our family and for many refugee families too. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Lizette. Very heartfelt, very personal and touching. Thank you. I now invite Jan and Heather to share stories of significance and more about the historical Markers Trail.
I want to share the story of Peter John. Now, Mia is here today, his mum. Peter John shared this story with us. He's now living in Sydney, and I'm reading it on his behalf. On the 2nd of September 1975, my mother, Lee Mee, who was 8 months pregnant with me, was forced to flee her country of Timor-Leste when an invasion by the Indonesians was imminent. Many boat owners were charging fees to board their boats. My mother didn't have the amount they were asking, so she had to wait. She was among a group of refugees who stormed the last ship to leave, the Konpira Maru, as it was leaving Dili for Darwin. It was many years later before we were reunited with my father. There were many other pregnant women and orphan children on this journey to Australia. One of the women gave birth to her daughter, Lily Lay, who now lives in Melbourne. My mother was first sent to Eastbridge Migrant Hostel in Nunawading, where 20 days later I was born at the Box Hill Hospital. Very soon after that, we were all transferred to the Enterprise Migrant Hostel. At one time, there were 27 pregnant Timorese women at the hostel. And there's a photo on the first board there of 6 of the women and their babies. My mother was cared for by all the health services which were provided at Enterprise, particularly the maternal and child health nurse. The Springvale community was very generous, providing bassinets, blankets and clothing. My mother's involvement in this history project about the Enterprise Migrant Hostel in Springvale led me to explore my own family history and our arrival in Australia more deeply. I went to the launch at the exhibition buildings and I was very moved by the stories I heard, and I read more. I thought, what a life I have had. I went on to realise, as I studied the history of Timor-Leste, the land of my parents' birth, it was going through a delicate process of rebuilding itself, and it needed our help. But I wasn't sure what I could do. Then I realised, as a runner of marathons, in some small way, I was experiencing the mental and physical hardship faced through those who are fleeing an unstable country. I also had made myself aware of the enormous challenges in Timor-Leste, how it was facing as it was rebuilding for the future. And yet, education, I knew, was a gateway to success. But as I studied more of Timor-Leste, I found that in 2016, 9,000 of their teachers were unqualified. I decided to bring my love of marathon running, my need to contribute to the rebuilding of Timor-Leste, and my belief education was a way of doing that. So I entered the Racing the Planet project, seeking sponsorship for scholarships to train teachers for Amera schools in Timor-Leste. Peter ran 6 marathons on 6 different continents, experiencing the coldest, the hottest, the very high altitudes, and he told me later there were a couple of times where other people helped him to finish and where he helped others to finish. He raised sufficient funds to provide a scholarship for a young person to become a fully qualified teacher by funding the cost of the education course, the accommodation and all the food and the travel backwards and forwards to their home.
The project has reunited many old friends from the hostel days. At the opening of the Immigration Museum display, 2 of these women were mothers of 2 little girls. One with a 6-year-old who was ineligible to have an egg for breakfast, and the other child under 6 who didn't like eggs. The younger child lined up each morning for her egg and handed it to the older child. On the day of the launch, the mother of the little girl who loved eggs found a china egg in the gift shop. The 2 mothers stood ceremoniously on the steps of the Immigration Museum, and the very grateful mother of the recipient of those eggs all those years ago gave the china egg to the other mother. It was a beautiful moment for us all. Merle often spoke of the family of 4 who arrived at the hostel by bus from the airport, with one suitcase, thanks Jan, holding their belongings. As they stood in front of what was to be their new home in Australia, they saw the beautiful garden of red roses. Immediately they felt comforted and knew if these roses were being cared for, so would they be. This story became the reason why the project approached Trelaw Roses to name a rose the spirit of enterprise. And this is the beautiful rose, and the painting became our cards, which raised funds for the project. Actually, I recall it was during the consultation that we talked about the meaning of the rose, and it really, everyone was mentioning it. And Jim, who was one of the landscape architects, said, "That's fine, we'll name a rose." And we all went, "Yeah, Jim, yeah." So the next time we met, he'd been in touch with Trelaw Roses, and there was a new immigrant rose coming from Ireland without a name, and it became the Enterprise Rose. It was lovely. During the consultation, it became obvious to the Enterprise Group that people needed somewhere to bring their family to share stories of their time at the Enterprise Hostel. Many had not talked to their families about their journey, which was really quite amazing. That came to light quite a few times. One person said, "Honouring Enterprise is not just about the people, it's the place. Very important to have something at Lexington Gardens. It was my birthplace in Australia." The former Scab. Scab was often the first place people visited after arriving at the hostel. Workers from Scab would run information sessions at the hostel, often with several interpreters operating simultaneously. I can still see one of them in full flight down there with, people all around the room. One of the social workers would walk groups of people back to Scab to show them where to come for support. It was fondly known as the Bureau, or Number 5. Springvale Neighbourhood House. Merle, as Director of the Bureau, and Jan, as the Mayor of Springvale, saw the need for a neighbourhood house to provide support to the many cultural communities arriving at the hostel. Support was given by the house to these emerging communities to help in their settlement. Many formed groups became incorporated, began cultural dance groups, as Lisette has spoken about, and participated in activities in the wider community, such as the Some Nation World Cultural Festival. Many people from those early days are still involved. The Department of Social Security, which Lisette also referred to. At the launch of the Social Security marker, the Minister of the day, Maurice Payne, rose to welcome everybody. Her first words were, "It's a pleasure to be here. When one receives an invitation from Merle Mitchell across their desk, one doesn't hesitate to attend, because Merle said I should." This brought a round of chuckles from those attending. In the early hostel days, as Director of Scab, Merle attended the Social Security offices and told the staff they needed to take themselves to the Enterprise Hostel to meet new arrivals, rather than them expecting them to take quite a long walk to their offices. When we later interviewed the staff as part of the early stages of the project, one of the staff who had been there from those early days remarked to Merle that she remembered that happening and it had changed the way Social Security operated.
Before I talk about the next marker, I want to acknowledge a key person. Heather's given Merle and I the credit for the neighbourhood house, but Roy Boyd, who's here today, he was the city engineer. Without his contribution, his cooperation, it wouldn't have happened. The Springvale Road shops. During the 1970s, the Springvale shopping centre was in decline. New regional shopping centres were forming on the perimeter, and gradually and resulted in several empty shops. Gradually, the cultural, economic and energy coming from the residents at the hostel and those of them who moved into the community breathed new life into this shopping centre, and as you can see today, if you try and get a car park on a Saturday or a Sunday, never mind during the week, it is a very busy place. Springvale Primary School. Geraldina mentioned that the first ethnic AIDS program in Victoria was pioneered at the Springvale Primary School. Joan Santa Isabel, a student welfare officer working at the Community Aid and Advice Bureau, 5 Osborne Avenue, developed this innovative program, which provided educational support for both parents and the students. The statewide program is now called the Multicultural Education AIDS Program. The Springvale Health Precinct. This site is marked near the former Springvale Community Hospital, which is now the Springvale Community Health Centre, and where a range of health services are offered today. It acknowledges the many pioneering medical professionals who supported the residents of the hostel. They identified the many complex needs, mental and physical, and set about developing programs to meet those needs. One of those professionals is pharmacist Richard Lim, who is with us today. Still continuing to serve his community. The Springvale Community Hub, where we are today, it was the Spirit of Enterprise group that ensured that there was a national competition to select the architects good enough to design and build this building. This group's vision statement was part of the architect's brief, and the architects who were selected, we didn't have anything to do with the selection, we didn't go that far. The architects who were selected contacted Merle almost immediately to have discussions with us, because he was so moved by that statement and the concepts expressed in it that he wanted to reflect that from the early planning stage. There are 2 people, or 3 people, who aren't with us today. One is Merle, who we've acknowledged all the way through. The other 2 are Betty and Joyce. Joyce Ribeiro was committed to effective community development and social justice throughout her professional life. She was also a migrant coming from India in the 1960s. She was able to ensure, as part of our group, that we kept to the stated values of our project. She would pull us up and she said, hang on, is that what you think we're being asked to do? Now, it's a brave person who pulls Merle up with such a comment, but we did it. Joyce, she was a gifted wordsmith. She was able to put in words, beautiful words, what we were trying to for any of our pamphlets, any of our booklets, and most importantly, that statement that went into the architect's brief. It was those words that we thank Joyce for. Thank you.
Betty Wilderman was a great contributor to the core Enterprise group as well. Actually, Betty did come through. She came from England, but she came through the hostel as well. She had been Merle's PA in her working life, so brought many organisational skills to the project. While she had a reserved nature, she was unflappable and the voice of reason as we faced obstacles along the way. With each event, she kept us all in line and ensured all the boxes had been ticked so there were no upsets on the day. It is thanks to Betty that the project has been well recorded. We've missed her greatly.
Thank you both. Ladies and gentlemen, as we near the end of today's celebrations, I'd like to take a moment to reflect on the incredible legacy of Merle, whose vision and dedication were the heart and soul of the Spirit of Enterprise project. While Merle is no longer with us, her passion, leadership and commitment to preserving the history of our community continue to guide us. It is thanks to her tireless efforts alongside the working group that we are here today celebrating the official launch of this important project. I would also like to acknowledge two other members of the working group, Betty and Joyce, who are no longer with us. Their contributions were invaluable and their memory lives on in the work we celebrate today. Heather and Jan, you are both remarkable people. The Spirit of Enterprise Trail Map is a testament to the group's collaboration and commitment to honouring the migration history that has shaped Springvale. And for this, we thank you. I'm going to present the ladies with some flowers. As a side note, not sure if you're all aware, however, the image of the rose that you have on the cards and the bookmarks, and this image here has been created by the most talented Heather Duggan, a woman of many talents. Other individuals who've played key roles in supporting various projects include the late Eric Mitchell and Don McLeod, as well as Rosemary McLeod, Eileen Sims and Geraldina Alvarez-Poblet. Special acknowledgement goes to Council Officers Prue Hawkey, Brad Cooper and Rhonda Diffie, whose advocacy and behind-the-scenes efforts were instrumental in keeping the projects alive, even when it would have been easier to say no. Now, it's my great pleasure to announce that the Spirit of Enterprise Trail Map is officially launched and invite Rick Mitchell, son of Merle and Eric, to come forward and cut the cake.